I think for me the biggest lie is that drinks packages make sense for everyone.
Yes.
When the cruise line says you're safe, we're doing you a favour, they're not doing anybody a favour. And people can be quite tribal. I mean, there's certain cruise lines, if you dare to say something against it, you're going to get a barrage.
If cruise lines spend more time thinking about the purchase journey, quite shocked because I didn't appreciate the role that YouTube plays in driving people to buy cruises. I think it's massive.
The Sail Away Uncensored Cruise Podcast.
Have megaships killed the magic of cruising these days?
I don't think they have really, because I think the advantage with megaships is they brought in a completely different new set of people to cruising. So like families, younger people. So I think they've probably changed the nature of cruising, but I'm not sure they've kind of killed the magic. I think they've changed the magic, if you like. I'm quite excited about megaships in a sort of a slightly bizarre way, because they're bringing in like value to families, young people and stuff. So they're bringing kind of converting people from being land into sea. Have they changed the nature of cruising? I guess they have, but there are other kind of options out there.
I think, you've certainly got a lot more choice than you used to. I mean, if you think back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, you only had one type of cruise, which was pretty much your traditional or classic cruise. So there's a whole sector that wasn't there. I mean, probably there's, I don't know, is there a 3-tier market now? You've got your theme park type ships, your family ships, increasingly some adults only. And then you've got still some of these classic ships which are still going. But if you were to say, has it killed it? Possibly in a sense of which ports you can go to now. Because these ships, when you've got 6,000, 7,000 people getting off, you're really narrowing your selection of the types of ports that you can go to. So I think some of these cute, particularly European ones, or some of these other smaller ports, the big ships can't go there anymore. So possibly it's killed that element of cruising.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because it's in reality what megaship is doing. It's become more and more about that as the destination, because to your point, there's very few ports you can go to, or they're extending the ship into private islands or private resorts because they just can't go to many places. I'm quite intrigued to see in the Caribbean that's more obvious what you can do. They're sort of starting to do that in Alaska with some of the ports like Sitka, which is created by Norwegian effectively, and it's going to be interesting what they do in Europe because that's going to be much more challenging.
Do you think that cruise lines are also becoming a bit lazy when it comes to their itineraries? Because something we've called out quite a few times is, particularly itineraries that are going out of the UK, it's just the same ports again and again and again. It doesn't seem to, with particularly the cruise lines with the much bigger ships, you can almost guess what 3 or 4 ports are going to feature on a mini cruise, for example, and there doesn't seem to be that interest in exploring other ports of call in the way maybe smaller lines.
I think also it may be a function of that the cruise lines are very obsessed with attracting you to cruise. So I think that's also maybe why you're seeing more kind of repetitive stuff, because if you're attracting you to cruise, particularly with those more mainstream lines, they don't need to go to lots of different places because people aren't, it's the first time they're going. But I think you're right. It's quite hard to find a Western Mediterranean or an Eastern Mediterranean itinerary that's unique and different. And I think that's quite a big challenge.
On the point you made about variety, there's certainly more variety these days. It's just unfortunate that variety comes at a cost.
Absolutely.
And also with megaships, we said the magic of cruising, the biggest bit of magic for me when I fell in love with cruising at the age of 12 was how good the service was and the space that you got on board. And I feel that it's impossible with a super large ship, something like one of the big MSC ones, to actually come close to matching what service used to be because there's just too many people on board.
But I think there is starting to become now quite a lot of few people in cruising who want to go back to that old style. I don't think everybody wants these new big brash mega ships. I think increasingly people are saying some of these older ships are suddenly coming back into fashion. They're coming back into vogue. I mean, we're going next week on Crystal. Their ships are over 30 years old, and service and cuisine on board is very important. I mean, you were on Crystal a few months.
Fantastic. It's incredible. Yeah.
But these older ships are starting to see a renaissance, and I think that's fantastic. And that's what I think is great about the market is you've got this diversity now. There's nothing wrong with going on an old ship as long as they maintain it, as long as it looks good. I think that's key because you can't just have an older ship unless they maintain it. It's got to be in good nick.
What's the biggest lie in the cruise industry at the moment, and why aren't more influencers calling it out?
For me, it's that they still talk about being an all-inclusive experience, but in reality, it's the same as going to Vegas. I'm going to Vegas next week, and also, you have a fare, a hotel price, but that's not the price because you've got resort fees and all this sort of stuff. It's the same with cruising. It's supposedly all-inclusive. That's the story, but that gratuity is going to be slapped on, and then stuff is slapped on. So I think it's that sense of I just wish they'd have a price, and I know why they do it, because you want to advertise X amount of money to be attract people's attention. But for me, that's the biggest thing, is like the fare. Everyone knows, particularly with gratuities. I mean, there's other elements of it, but everyone knows that the real price is 100. It's not 80, because you're paying. You got the gratuities there, and you can't get away from that. I think that for me is probably the thing. And it's interesting, because even if you look at the other end, if you look at kind of the ultra luxury, is as they wrestle again, I guess, with pricing and costs and stuff, is they sort of went more all-inclusive, and like Silver Sea is sort of backpedaling slightly and taking excursions out, and it's sort of manipulating a little bit like what is all-inclusive. So every line has a different interpretation of kind of all-inclusive, but that for me is the big one. The fare is not the fare, because gratuities should be in the fare, kind of thing.
I think for me the biggest lie is that drinks packages make sense for everything.
Yes.
When the cruise line says you're safe, we're doing you a favour, they're not doing anybody a favour. I mean, I think for a lot of people, drinks packages don't make sense.
Correct.
Particularly if you're going on a longer cruise or a port-intensive cruise, you're going to be ashore. You're not going to be there. And whilst a booze cruise for 2 or 3 days, yes, okay, you can drink a lot of drink. If you're going on a 1-week cruise or a 2-week cruise, by the time you've got into 3 or 4 days in, you can't keep having 10, 15 drinks a day, which is almost the tipping point where it becomes worthwhile or not. So I think when they say that drinks packages make sense, you must do it, I think that's a lie. Plus also, I think the have it all style package, where they say we're doing you a favour. They've done the sums, they're not doing you a favour. I think people have really got to work out whether it makes sense for them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the point I always make in my videos is, no business, and certainly no cruise line is going to launch something that's in your favour, if you like. Because that's not, they're not in the business to do you a favour. So I'm always like, they do a package, to your point, because that's over everyone who buys it is more profitable than people buying it kind of individually. And you're right. So the real story is it's more convenient. So I often buy that. Like, I don't drink alcohol, but I'll often might buy the package simply because it becomes more convenient.
So do you think that's what new cruisers are being tricked into?
Well, my point is, it's a bit building on that point. My point is like, new to cruise, you need to think from home to home. What is the cost? So even when you're comparing lines, that's why often you'll find, particularly if you're going in a premium line, Celebrity or Cunard or whatever, you actually find you could probably go a luxury line or even ultra luxury line if you did a door-to-door cost. Because once you've added in drinks package, Wi-Fi, specialty dining, depending on how you cruise, you may find it's cheaper, or better value, or whatever. That's the thing. It's that. I know the cruise is not the only one. I mean, I'm using the Vegas one, but Vegas is the same. Everything's hidden amongst,
I mean, that is quite an Americanized thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't stand going into a shop in America and not actually knowing how much it's going to come to, because you see the price of a pack of biscuits and then you get to the till and
because tax is not in the list price.
I think they're more used to it than what we are, and I feel like the experience of going on a cruise is fundamentally changing. We got off Queen Mary 2 a few days ago, and for a mini cruise like the one we were on, the drinks package, the premium one was $125 per person, and then you've got to pay the 15% gratuities on top.
Also, I think people quite rightly are saying, like, okay, what's the best deal I can get on a cruise? So for weeks or months, they say, okay, that's £10 or $10 cheaper, that's 20. So they shave off to the minimum a cruise, even maybe go on a worse cruise because it's $50 less. And then say, okay, well, let's spend $115 a day each on a drinks package. And you think that drinks package is often more than the cost of the cruise was in the first place.
So what cruise line do you think's faking it the best at the moment then, when it comes to their offerings and saying they're all inclusive and everything else?
I don't know about maybe faking it in terms of that, but I wish that MSC was more of an innovator rather than a copier. I think that they're taking the best parts, often maybe what Royal Caribbean's done or somebody else has done. I know they've got their swanky Swarovski staircase and all these other bits, but I wish that sometimes they would actually come up with something bold that nobody else had thought of.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think there's a great deal of innovation there. I mean, certainly, I don't think Royal Caribbean are worrying too much at the moment. I mean, we spoke to quite a few people that have been on MSC World Europa. I'm not sure if either of you have been on that class of
no.
ship, but there's a running theme when we talk to people, and they say, "Well, it's obvious they've tried to copy the Oasis class, but they haven't pulled it off."
Like it's the aft, isn't it, with the slide and the split?
Yeah,
And the districts.
yeah,
The districts,
like Royal Caribbean have just done it to a completely different level, and it looks like MSC have tried to copy them, but they haven't pulled it
But
off.
I think what me and Jay always say with Royal Caribbean though is that they usually do stuff just because, like, they will put on a water slide and not think, oh, is that going to make me money? They do it because they think people will just pay to come on to do that or to experience this or to experience the ice skating. Whereas I think other cruise lines think, how can I make money off of it? Therefore, am I going to do it or not?
I mean, what I think is interesting about Royal Caribbean is when they launch a new ship like Icon, I mean, people are prepared to pay crazy money to go on. And the way they do it is they're quite clever because they run short cruises. So people say, okay, I've got a budget of 100 or 200 and I'll go on because I want to try all these wonderful new things. But I'm out of pocket only 200. The fact they're only going for 3 days. But to your point, they could probably go for a week on, a luxury ship or whatever for the same. But they don't. They want to because the brand is, I want to try the new thing, the new flying thing, the new something or other. Yeah.
Is there a cruise line that either of you have travelled on that you would never go back to?
The problem is I look at cruising probably with the wrong eyes. I look at what's good for content and what people want to know about.
Yeah.
So here's the line that I'm less keen on. I mean, probably the one I'm most cautious about is Costa because, but it's a very long time since I went on Costa and they've changed quite dramatically. But there was nothing really that excited me about Costa. But I sort of would like to go back because I want to see how they've changed. So for me, there isn't one because I always look at it with people want to know about it. Even if it's really bad, people want to know about it.
We said we'd never go back on MSC again. But where are we going in 2 months' time? On their new ship, World America, because I think that's a very different product. I think they've realised that for the American or North American market, they need to do it totally differently. Because, I mean, what kills MSC from an image point of view is how rammed it is in a lot of the European sailings. But Americans are masters of numbers management. You only got to go to a theme park in America, and there are thousands of people in and out. And so I think that they're going to manage that a lot better. So you won't have these terrible disembarkation lines. Also, the way they've pimped out the ship, it's got a different feel to it.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued to see how MSC American version MSC is going to be different.
Yeah.
What popular ship right now gets too much praise, in your opinion, and one that's constantly underrated?
I think the cruise line which is perhaps underappreciated, I think, is Azamara. Because I think Azamara have got themselves a really nice niche. I know people are very keen on saying ultra luxury bracket, luxury bracket, premium bracket. Some of these cruise lines don't necessarily naturally fit in there, and I think Azamara is one of those. Where would you put it? Luxury, premium luxury, something like that. And sometimes you can pick up a really good deal on Azamara. I think people are maybe put off because they're these older class Renaissance ships. So they're 20, 25 years old now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting too. I think it's a good example because when I meet people, or a lot of people contact me saying, please go on Azamara again. Because I haven't been on, I went not that long after the pandemic, maybe 2 years after the pandemic, when their new owners were still trying to get on top of it. And I think they have, from what I can see, they've kind of got on top of it. But it does, I guess, because they don't have the clout as the big line. So they kind of get lost a little bit. And people are nervous, I think, because there's still quite a lot of bad reviews about them. But I think you're right. People who've been on them recently are big fans.
We were on them last year, and I think they get a lot right. There's only 680 passengers, fantastic passenger to space ratio, and the people who are on board, I would call them, they're very easygoing. It's not the stuffy crowd, they're not the wild, raucous crowd. They're just people who want to go on a nice cruise, have a good time. And the white nights on Azamara, I would say possibly are some of the best white nights you get at sea.
We really enjoy.
They do it well.
Yeah,
they do it
really well.
When we did it, we were sailing away from Montenegro, which, as you know, was beautiful. But it was
beautiful.
It was very memorable.
Yeah.
And to be honest, our first question was about the magic of cruising. It's that sort of thing that's magic to us. I really personally couldn't give a stuff about all the gimmicks and everything on the ship. I'm all about the tradition and whether the service is good and the food's good. And
Because Azamara is very good at picking itineraries which would suit their style of cruising, because it's a really good al fresco type indoor-outdoor type of ship.
Yeah.
When you have a white night out on deck, which majority of them are on Azamara, weather permitting, it's a fantastic atmosphere. You're sitting there as the sun goes down, twilight, all the food is served on deck, fantastic spread like you used to see back in the day, how cruising used to be, the spread, the effort they make on those white nights.
So what's the biggest red flags in a cruise ship's promotional video or material these days that they put out?
For me, I would say showing the ship in an unrepresentative light. I mean, if they show you in their PR empty decks, empty swimming pools, nobody there whatsoever, and you think, in what world was that representative of the cruise that we were on? So I think they've got to be honest about the experience you're really going to get on a ship. If it's rammed, okay, they're not going to tell you it's rammed, but at least have some people in the picture, some people in the video.
Do you know what? That's one of my real pet peeves, and there's some cruise lines which I feel are very, very guilty for misrepresentation. You'll watch an advert and I can literally say upcharge. That's an upcharge. You know, the way they'll present it, it's like a celebrity chef is going to be cooking for you each night, but they're not making it this at the year. And you're going to have a well-known wine expert selecting all the wines there and then. And as you said about the pools, this really drives me mad. You'll see a cruise line put out an Instagram post of a swimming pool on one of their biggest ships that carry over 6,000 passengers, and there's not a single person there.
Or they'll show you a picture from the retreat or the haven and not actually point out that's not what everybody's going to be getting.
Yeah.
My biggest bugbear probably is the people they show in the advertising, which are hardly ever the people that you'll encounter on the cruise. And some of them will run, clearly they've got a diversity checklist. So they've got an Asian and a black person, a white person, an old person, a young person, sort of a gay couple, a lesbian couple. It's like... Or they'll show an age group which is not representative, because they'll show younger, beautiful people, and that's kind of very frustrating, because you just know when you're on board that's not who you're going to see.
And I think a lot of cruise lines are guilty for that, actually. So unfortunately, sometimes it's just not real what you see. In the adverts.
No, it's just like so many adverts. The people in the adverts, you will not see them on board.
No.
They're not on board. That's not who goes.
Or does Virgin go the opposite extreme and put?
No, exactly.
They go too far.
They go the opposite.
We think it puts people off.
No, it's interesting because they. I mean, I was reading something. They did a thing on Brilliant Lady where the new marketing person is saying they're trying to undo almost the damage.
They're rolling backwards.
They're trying to roll backwards to show a more representative messaging and people.
I think we'll come on to Virgin a bit later on, but with Virgin, the way we feel is that they get a lot of things very, very right, but then I think that there's a few areas that they've probably gone a bit too far with things. Another area is the whole obsession with fitness. And we said in our recent review of Brilliant Lady, you're going to get people that are interested in fitness on a Virgin cruise, but I think I would probably say that the majority of people are just your average cruiser that likes to eat a lot and drink a lot, and they don't really care if there's a boxing ring on the deck. They'd actually prefer to have probably an extra hot tub.
Look, if they do another class of ship, I think it'll be fundamentally different. They've learnt their lessons. I think they would make sure there's an inside pool, because there's nowhere to go. They can't do those cold itineraries. It's a very outward facing ship.
It's very different in way the ship.
Yeah, so I think it would be fundamentally different in the future if and when they do one.
I mean, I think they'd have to. I mean, there's a lot of questions as to why Brilliant Lady has just been at anchor off Italy for the last year. I mean, it's, to a lot of people, it seems like a very odd thing to do. Surely you'd have it sailing around and generating revenue. I reckon they probably ordered one ship of that class too many. I think in hindsight, it probably would have.
Well, I think you're right. I think they're struggling from my itinerary perspective. I mean, the Australia thing didn't work.
Yeah.
They didn't make money there, from what I could see. And the ship is very, as you say, you need warm weather.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it copes in Alaska. It's very interesting they're taking it to Alaska, because the ship's not an Alaska ship.
We're talking like cold weather and interiors. Have cruise ship interiors become a bit too generic and soulless?
I think these things sort of go through trends, and I think there's a trend which is a sort of the more beige palette, and they do feel a little bit samey. So I was just recently on Silver Nova, which is it's a beautiful ship, but I was on I don't know, 6 or 9 months ago, I was on Norwegian Viva, and it was very similar color palette and in some ways feel. Now, obviously, it's a bit more luxurious and it's a bit plush and stuff, but I think it kind of goes through phases, and I think it's interesting that the differentiation, I think, is a little bit of from a brand drift. I think it's also interesting because if you look at Silver Sea, we were talking about Silver Sea before, down before it started, each of their ships are so different now. So actually, if you go on Silver Sea, you want to step into Silver Sea. It's the same as Queen Anne is very different ship.
Yeah.
Feel when you step into Queen Anne, you don't feel like you step into Queen Anne. So I think it's some of them are losing kind of what does this brand feel like, look like, and it's becoming confusing from that perspective.
Yeah.
But they're clearly it's the new trend. It's light and bright and.
I do worry about the Cunard Queen Anne.
When Gary's face says it all completely.
Well, we've been on a couple of times now. We went on Norwegian fields in August time, and we went to Christmas cruise last year. So we've seen it under two different circumstances. And the first time I walked round, my heart sunk because I like to walk around late at night to drink it in, to really think, well, what do I actually feel? And I walked around at night on several evenings. I walked in and out of the Queen's room. I went in and out of various places. I thought, what have they done? It was almost as though they recruited a head of Bland and said, or they thought, okay, we need to go forward to the next generation of cruises. What can we do? Well, let's copy a bit of this from one cruise line. Let's copy a bit of that. And I think they've fallen totally between two stools. Let's forget whether the Queen's room's too small or the band can't fit on the stage. Let's just look, because I think when you go on Cunard, more than any other ship, it's about the feel. It's about the yacht.
Stepping into a world, yeah.
And if it doesn't make you feel right, let's suppose you thought you'd bought a Bentley or a Rolls. Well, you don't want to get in it and feel like you're in a Renault. I mean, nothing wrong with a Renault, but that's not what you thought you bought. And when you buy a ticket for Cunard, it's an experience. Yeah. And I worry that they've got it completely and utterly wrong with Cunard. And the only way I thought that it sort of went okay was when we were on the Christmas cruise, because there were Christmas trees everywhere, and Cunard does Christmas so well. I almost felt they should leave the Christmas decorations up for the whole year, because actually it gave that little bit of sparkle, that little bit of glimmer that Cunard ships need.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I did my review of Queen Anne, my point was I feel like Cunard have chartered a ship to run, because things were there, as they would normally have, the guest speakers and the Queen's room, the band and stuff. But it literally felt they chartered a ship.
I mean, how we feel about Queen Anne, I think she's a nice looking ship. I just don't think she belongs with Cunard, if I'm honest. And as I said, we got off Queen Mary 2 a few days ago, and there's something special walking about that ship. I mean, I love the width of the promenade. Like, we'll walk around it for hours, and I like walking around the ship and looking at all of the various artwork. On Queen Anne, it was immediately obvious to us there was a distinct lack of artwork that paid homage to their history and their heritage. Having been on two of the pinnacle class ships of Holland America, I didn't even think the fit out was as good.
I agree with you. I think Holland, because I guess they were made for pinnacle class, was made for Holland America pinnacle class ships. I really like personally.
Yeah, I do.
And adding that middle section with, I guess, to force fit a Queen's room in, it just doesn't really work. But also the theatre is so much better on pinnacle class Holland America, because they've done them sort of around, whereas the sightline is really poor on Queen Anne, the way they've done it.
Moving away from Cunard for a second, I think some cruise ships that we've been on do feel a bit soulless in places. Like, I know Avia and Iona get a bit of a tough time when it comes to the atrium, because there's a lot of people that think it just feels a bit like an airport lounge, really. It's not very glitzy or glamorous.
But you could say that about Virgin ships. Some people think they're quite soulless, and they're quite dull.
I think Virgin ships there's not much wow to them. You
not
walk
really
around them and it's all quite muted.
Then you've got other ones like MSC where they've got the crystal staircase and it's very in your face.
I think it comes back to the thing you were asking earlier about the trend. I mean, the trend is very much into lots of little small venues. So away from the big drama of the big atrium. Yeah. And like the Virgin ships are one of the earliest ones. The Norwegian ships are a bit like that. Like Nova's a bit like that. It's all about the small little venues rather than the drama of that walk-in, glitzy kind of atrium, grand entrance, sweeping staircase thing.
If you could erase one cruise trend forever, what would it be?
I think we touched on it earlier, upcharges and tipping. It's infuriating. I think, you don't want to be press gang the moment you get on a ship and directed by this and this. I don't know anybody that likes the pressure of upcharges. So why cruise lines think we want it, I'm not sure.
My other one would be this continual drive into bigger and bigger ships. I know why it's happening, partly because of the economics, partly because LNG, you have to make bigger ships and stuff like that. But even the ultra luxury lines are getting into bigger ships. The new region one's 850 versus 750. So that kind of drive into ever bigger, coming back to where we started the conversation earlier about just the ports and stuff. But I think it's a pity that everything has to be bigger. Finding a better sweet spot would be good. And even some of the lines that used to have smaller ships are getting bigger. So it's going to be interesting to see if when, for example, when Asamara eventually at some point will have to get to new builds, I bet they go bigger.
Also, I think you've got to ask of these new ships what percentage of it is accessible, because you've got this ship within a ship. The percentage, the majority you've got is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You're being shrunk.
Particularly on Norwegian, that's a big challenge.
And you can't even look forwards on a lot of these ships anymore because those areas, the sweet guests, you can only look forward if you're a sweet guest. Everybody else has to look sideways.
Yeah.
I mean, when Norwegian Aqua came into Southampton for a maiden, we were supposed to join it, and on that morning I put the drone up, and when I brought it back down, I said to Dan, I cannot believe how much of the upper decks are for Haven. It just looked like the Haven guests had so much more space than the majority who was on the ship.
And I think Cunard unfairly gets slammed on this. People always say, oh, Cunard, it's so class-based. Well, that's exactly what ship within a ship is. Yeah. It's like third class or business class on a plane. And so there is a class system on all the ships now. If you're not within the Retreat or the Haven or whatever, that's a class system.
And I actually think with Cunard, it's actually far less obvious because, as I said, when we were on Queen Mary 2 last week,
I couldn't tell.
I mean, we were on there to do filming, and we were able to just wander onto the Grills Terrace to do filming, and there was no questions asked at all.
I mean, in reality, Cunard have fallen dramatically behind the trend when it comes to elevating kind of the suite experience. I mean, they're way behind even MSC, Celebrity, Norwegian. They've kind of been completely overtaken in terms of that. I mean, for the regular passenger, it's a plus, but certainly if you're a Queen's Court passenger, if you went on Celebrity Retreat, you're going to have a way more exclusive experience.
Your dream cruise, just a click away. From luxury liners to no-fly cruises, supercruises.com makes booking simple and stress-free. Book now at supercruises.com and set sail on the trip of a lifetime.
Should cruise lines be fined when port visits are cancelled or cruises are cancelled entirely due to their own operational delays?
I'm kind of torn on that. One of the things that I once made a video about, actually, because I quite like the fact that within the airline industry, there is, and I guess it comes originally from the EU, I know the UK has picked it up, there is a sort of like a rule around what happens with compensation. So we were once going to Australia and our flight got cancelled because it was longer than 14 hours or something. It was very clear, this is the compensation, boom, boom, it was done, applied it, and we got it within 2 weeks or something. So I would quite like more structure around it, because it's quite difficult. Like what should you be compensated? What shouldn't you be compensated? So, and cruise lines, even within cruise lines, will do different things. So sometimes they'll offer compensation, sometimes they won't. So I think it would be quite nice if the industry, because I guess the way it's regulated, had a view. We're going to pay compensation for that. We're not going to pay compensation for that, and there it is.
I do think that some cruise lines are abusing the convenience of just being able to cancel a port or a cruise entirely. I mean, we've had it this year. I just think it's getting to a point now where it's not fair on the passengers. Passengers should be able to book their cruise and look forward to it.
I mean, you're right. There's a lot of volatility in terms of cruises being put on, and as they adjust, like Norwegian cancelled loads of stuff because they moved ships back into the Caribbean, and they moved home port in different places because they're shifting to more short cruises and stuff. That's why I agree with you. The great thing about if you're flying on an airline, you know exactly what the story is.
With many European ports pushing back on the cruise industry, are we seeing the beginning of a serious anti-cruise movement, particularly in Europe?
I think we're going to run out of interesting ports to go to.
Yeah.
As there's more cruise lines, more ships, they're trying to scratch their heads and think, where can I sell as interesting? And some cruise stops you go to, particularly where the cruise ship is miles out of town. It could be at a container terminal or nowhere near. I mean, Venice, for example, you don't get anywhere near Venice. I mean, even Civitavecchia is not really that close. So I think the problem is that you can say, well, is that really an interesting port? Which is why increasingly they're saying, well, just stay on the ship. Well, that's really copping out. You shouldn't say, well, we've got nowhere interesting to go, just stay on the ship.
I think absolutely. But I think it's not just cruise. I think it's also fueled a lot by this general view that there's over tourism. Because if you actually look at a lot of the protests, which are becoming more and more organized, particularly in Europe, or in cases like Alaska as well, and it's a lot of it's kind of populist rather than by politicians, is there's just a sense of we're just being overrun.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of it is an argument about Airbnb because it's making places become more expensive. It's closing people out. But I think the cruise thing is going to, because it's so visible, isn't it? You've got a ship arrive, X amount of people pour off. So I think there is a big trend. And I think also to your point is the trouble is because ships are bigger, there's so fewer places they can go. So they're going to swamp Barcelona, they're going to swamp Santorini, they're going to swamp Civitavecchia or wherever. So I think there is a trend. And I think the problem is that the cruise industry, because the way it's organized, it's obviously individual companies. And you do have some like Clear, but Clear will be, in the UK, or Clear will be in the US. So there's no real true kind of global, I know they try, but there's no true global way of connecting with these ports that I can see. And maybe in the background there is. But you always, like, there's no way to build a really so when it blows up, I can't remember this one recently where they're now suing, it's Hawaii. So Clear's now suing Hawaii because they're introducing these new fees, which I can't remember the exact detail, but they're introducing daily fees or something, and so Clear's sort of suing them, but it's all very ad hoc. Kind of what you need is early on be working with Hawaii, like, how can we make this work? What can we do? And I don't know, I guess there's no infrastructure, structure, but I think absolutely there's going to be a big push back.
Also, I think from the UK market, particularly, it's going to struggle, I think, to be a year-round destination more. I mean, if you've got the Canary Islands saying we don't want cruise ships anymore, you've got Barcelona water can. A cruise line can't sell a cruise if you're going to get a hostile populace. So I don't know how long the UK is going to be a year-round cruise destination in winter. I think they're going to run out of places to go.
Because there is a lot of pushback in the Canary Islands. Very organised.
I mean, it's one of the few places to go in the winter months, and you can't go there. I mean, P&O, for example, I mean, their schedule is going to be decimated if they can't go to the Canary Islands anymore.
But we do quite a lot of business in the Netherlands, and we've heard from people there that Amsterdam have just had enough of cruise ships and then pushing them away, and then they're going to Rotterdam. And I feel like now you look at mini cruises, and most of the time Rotterdam will feature, so they're getting all of the tourists that would have been going to Amsterdam, but apparently there's already a movement in Rotterdam that's like, well, no, this is getting silly. We had 120 cruise ships visit last year. We don't want it going anymore.
And how many times are you going to go to Bruges or Le Havre?
Exactly.
These places, particularly in bleak January, February.
Look, we cruise often. We often don't get off. No, because we've been there so many times. We use it as an opportunity to catch up on emails or whatever other bits of work. But if you are a cruiser and you cruise 3 times a year, let's say out of the UK, you are going to get bored.
And the over tourism you mentioned, Gary, when we went to Santorini last year, we saw the over tourism with our very eyes, and I think we waited about an hour to get on the tender. It was just, and it clearly wasn't sustainable for all of these cruise ships to be there all fighting over a jetty.
And I think also sort of linked up, because I know Santorini and the Greek government have introduced new fees, but I think also the other thing is politicians increasingly are going to see cruising as a revenue more like Hawaii is doing it, Greek governments. So actually that's going to have a whole nother dynamic, because they're going to say, we've got 5,000 passengers and here's a chance to get another €10, $10 for everyone who arrives, and we can raise, because that's all the stuff you see is how much we're raising. Like Hawaii talk about, we can raise, I can't remember the numbers, so don't quote me on the numbers, but it's like a lot of money. There's about like $100 million kind of fees from stuff. So
I think where may be a beneficiary if the cruise lines can convince people to fly long haul is Asia, because that is such an untapped market. I know there are cruise lines which already do that, but not to the extent of the potential that's there. If you can just convince people to fly long haul, if you can bundle in those prices, that's got huge potential.
I don't think cruise lines advertise Asian itineraries half as much as what you see for Europe and
also expensive. I mean, Celebrity, who is there, the cost of their Asian cruises is disproportionately expensive.
Yeah, Asian, because I love cruising. I love Asia and I love cruising in Asia. But you're right, it's an expensive option, particularly once you've added on flights and stuff. And the challenge in Asia is a lot of the ports, to the point you made earlier, are very far from where you're going, particularly once you go into bigger ships. If you're on a small ship, but then it's very expensive. But the bigger ships, you're a lot of them, hour and a half, 2 hours away from where you want to go to. I'm just back from Japan, but there's quite a big growing groundswell in Japan to push back on tourism, as well. Not only cruise tourism, but just general tourism. So it's even bubbling there, and in relatively, do you want an undeveloped inverted kind of thing? There's already beginnings of pushing back. Yeah. Partly because Westerners are so badly behaved versus the Japanese.
That's a whole other topic. Yeah. But you two do have a reputation for being polished, though, and professional.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. But what is the most unfiltered moment you've ever had on a cruise, though?
Occasionally you go on an older ship, and when you do a review, it's supposed to be a review. It's not supposed to gloss over. And obviously when you do a review, you try to be balanced, because nobody wants to tune into something where you just grumble from beginning to end. It will be unwatchable. So you do try to balance out. You do try to be objective. But occasionally I've reviewed some older ships and I've said, oh, that drawer doesn't pull out, or that door's just fallen off, or that fridge doesn't work, or the aircon, and people feel that you're unfairly picking. And people can be quite tribal. I mean, there's certain cruise lines, if you dare to say something against it, you're going to get a barrage of
especially our Carnival Miracle review. I mean, I think most people, 8 or 9 out of 10 people, agreed what we had to say, but there were some real tribal Carnival loyalists in the comments. And
I mean, we had people accusing us that we had brought hairs with us in our suitcase to put by the bed, and we'd packed a dirty pillow to put in the.
And we should be more understanding, because it's an older ship. I don't agree with that. No, because really the standard should be the same whether you're going on a newer ship in the fleet or an older one.
And particularly if it's the same price. I mean, there are certain Celebrity, I think, does that. They price their older ships the same price as the newer ships quite often. And fine if the older ships are in good nick, but if they're not, then you feel shortchanged.
I mean, even if that cabin on Carnival Miracle was clean, which it most certainly wasn't, the decor was just absolutely knackered.
It wasn't for us.
I don't really know what Carnival were playing at.
But what people did gloss over, though, in that review of ours was that we actually praised how they fixed that cabin, though. People were very quick to say, oh, we shouldn't have complained, but they fixed it.
Well, their biggest complaint was that, we accepted the upgrade to a suite, so we shouldn't have covered our problem in the review. And my answer to that is, well, a balanced review doesn't cherry pick the highlights. What do you think of cruise lines that make things difficult for cruise influencers, such as obstructing filming and bans for honest feedback?
I mean, it would be very helpful if cruise lines were clear about what their rules were. It comes back to, like, if they were saying, this is our rules, this is, if you want to come on board and review our ship, here's the rules. I know that's, people might think that's kind of censorship, but I don't think it would just be helpful to say, this is like, here's the boundaries, if you like, and then people could decide what they were going to do with those. I've fortunately, I've never been stopped videoing or been stopped. So I don't know if I'm a minority, but sometimes it's just like, what's the boundaries? What are the rules? And I think if cruise lines do want to place limits, they should be upfront about it. So if they're saying, we don't want anyone to come on and review our ships, which is kind of nonsense, but then you can't come on and review our ships, just be clear about it. Or if there's rules around what you can show and can't show, because also then as an influencer, I hate that word influencer, but as a content creator, you could then say, I'm doing this review, but I wasn't allowed to film any food or whatever. You might decide you're not going to review it all. So I think setting boundaries would be clear. I think the problem at the moment it's a bit wild westy. So whenever issues are blown up, often it's been driven by a personality or an individual, like Ben and David, for example, had issues which they've been very public about. It's often blown up because of an individual has objected on the ship rather than there's a guideline or a rule. That's kind of my view. Maybe because I'm being fortunate, unlike some people. I've been fortunate. I haven't been stung yet. I keep waiting for it. I worry more about passengers' reaction, which is we were also talking about. I worry more about, I'm more attuned to what people are going to think and how they're going to react. So I'm very aware of what I'm filming, what I'm not filming. So I kind of censor around the passenger and influencing the passenger experience, which maybe that's why I've been fortunate not to have tripped up with lines so far.
Yeah,
but I think you've had more experience.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been stopped, but I think that it's trying to tread the right balance between not being too invasive, because what I try to do with the reviews is to show what a typical experience must be like. Now, if you film at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to show the ship in a typical day.
Exactly.
So it means by nature you have got to show the buffet at certain times where it might be busy. Now, you're not necessarily filming that to be devious and saying, isn't it busy? That's possibly what the buffet looks like at a normal time. So people can see what would the ship look like, or what would the bars look like. How easy is it to get a seat by the pool? So it's not necessarily trying to catch the cruise line out. It's just trying to accurately portray. And if you're going to do that, you do have to be about people. I mean, try not to zoom right in. You try not to stand behind. You try to surreptitiously stand in a corner or here. But to at least give people a feel, because I think if people are watching your reviews, at least try to show them an accurate representation of how it would be.
But unfortunately, though, that accurate representation is what the cruise lines don't want you to show.
Because you're countering their marketing efforts.
Exactly. They're showing an empty buffet, they're showing an empty pool, and then we've got
you're
likes
destroying the
image,
message that they're putting out, a bit like the whole swimming pool situation. So, they're putting an image out showing an empty pool, but we all know that on a big ship in...
Which is annoying, because I try not to give a slanted opinion. I try to show a typical one. But yes, you're absolutely right. If you show it anything other than perfect conditions, they're going to be possibly annoyed.
I think it's also what I think probably the lines struggle a little bit with is understanding where like content creators, certainly on YouTube, fit in kind of the hierarchy, or not the hierarchy, but the process of people's purchasing. So I think it's about what is it really like? What are you likely to find? So when I'm going on a new ship, I will go to, say, hard travel, because they do. The ships are always empty. The cabins are always empty. They're always pristine because they just film every single, and it's perfect because they say, okay, yeah, that cabin's for me, that cabin's not for you. But I'm not going to find what the experience of the ship is. I'm going to find it something quite factual. These are all the venues. This is the stuff. This is what the cabin is. This is how many plugs it's got. But so that's fine. I'll tick that. But then I want to go and I'm researching another cruise like on Silver Whisper, which I haven't been on before. So I looked at hard travel. I've got tick, 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 tick. Then I go and I want to look to see people who've been on Silver Whisper to see what they experienced. What was it like? To your point, how busy was the venues? What were the shows like? And that's quite an important part of the process. So I get, every cruise I've been on, I'm sure you both have had the same. People come up to me and say, the reason I'm on here is because of you. Now, they're not there because they did a beautiful marketing video, because the cruise line does that, or hard travel, because that's their job, does that. They're on because they wanted to know, what is it like? And I liked what I saw, and I'm on. And that's part of the process, I think. And I guess lines have to be a little bit comfortable with letting go. And maybe because there's people who probably they wanted to create something which is a drama, because that's how they see it important. And they get kind of hooked on that. But it's understanding the process. And I think they struggle with that because it is about letting go. It's probably like letting your kids go.
Yeah, of course.
It's letting go.
Do you think there's any cruise line that does that very well?
And I think it's interesting because sometimes the most telling thing for me is how the crew react. So, I was on Silver Sea recently, and when I've been on Regent and stuff, the crew come up to me and they're quite excited that I'm on board, because they say either we watch you, or actually before I change ships, I watched your video, which a lot of crew do. So they go again because they want the real experience. So some people said to me, like when I was on Silver Sea, they had been on, I can't remember what they were on, Celebrity, and the guy said to me, waiter said to me, I watched your video because I wanted to know what it was like. Back to your point, what it was like to work on Silver Sea. So that I think clearly that's. It probably hasn't quite answered your question, but that lines like that would seem quite with the crew, or see it as the role of what you're doing, which I assume then must bubble up through management. So I've had, again, the hotel director, when I'm on board, often the hotel director will come and say, either I watch you, or head office told because they picked up on social media that you're on, anything I can do to help. That for me is the telling point, is when they come and say, anything I can do to help. Not, can I steer you in this direction? Please don't do this. It's like, and I've found that on probably the higher end lines, I'm maybe more comfortable with it. But I certainly think, Silver Sea, I've been on Regent, I've been on, even a line which I'm quite critical of, Princess, seem relatively comfortable. Because they know that I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Princess, but maybe it's because I'm unbalanced. But they're quite comfortable, because when I went on Sun Princess, the Two Princess, it's actually the PR. I got I didn't tell the PR people I was on. I just got a little message saying, "Have a nice trip."
Yeah.
And that, so I know, okay,
Yeah.
I know, I'm on board. But that's why I think it comes back to the point. It's sometimes I just wish the lines would be upfront about it and say, okay, here's the story. This is the boundaries or whatever, and then we can decide what we do with that. In terms of whether we cover them, how we cover them.
I do worry that there is going to be some sort of clampdown in the future.
I still think I'm waiting for something to happen. That sense of I feel like something will happen where there'll be kind of rules or clampdown or stuff, which is a big risk. But also, I think maybe influence people, content creators. There's also kind of a bit of responsibility on us, because I think there is a feeling, because you see in the chat people talk about, I need to be dramatic, I need to be negative because that's what people want to watch. But for me, the biggest compliment that I get is most people, like 99.9% of people who come up and talk to me on cruise, say, we like it because you're balanced. So that means I'm talking, back to your point, I'm talking the good, I'm talking the bad, I'm talking the average. And that for me is what cruise lines should be looking for, balance, because that's going to be the strongest sell, is balance.
And I think
people aren't stupid. People, if everything's 100% positive, it's 100% negative. People aren't stupid. They know that's not reality.
The people on cruise lines, I think, need to recognise the good that people like us do for the cruise lines. Like, I think it's very convenient for them to latch on to a negatively slanted review and say, oh, well, that's really damaging to us. But I could be very critical of a ship like Carnival Miracle or P&O Avia. Didn't like either of them personally, but then we were more positive about our review of Britannia, and we're more positive about our review of Queen Mary too. So it works both ways.
I agree with you. I think if cruise lines spend more time thinking about the purchase journey that people go on, and really try to understand that more, I think they will be quite shocked, because I don't appreciate the role that YouTube plays in driving people to buy cruises. I think it's massive. And I think the mistake that people make, which is why they also keep on play music from my parents' generation or my age, is they think that because you're over 60, over whatever, you have no idea what a computer is. You know, like 60-something% of my views are people over 55, and like 40% of people over 65. So it's like, you know, but people assume that once you hit, I don't know, 40 or whatever you hit, you don't even know how to use YouTube. And I think they haven't understood, if there is the power of YouTube, and how many people are booking because of YouTube, I think they might have.
Also, I think sometimes cruise lines get enamored by possibly the wrong people. They often invite big influencers from Instagram, you know, people who've got 500,000 or 1 million, because those people are invited on generally for 1 or 2 days. They're not generally invited on for the entire cruise. They come on. Of course, they wax lyrical. They say it's fantastic. They have a lot of eyes on their ship. And I think cruise lines now increasingly say, well, we don't want to go to reviewers on YouTube who might be too honest. Even if we're straight, even if we're telling it as it is, they would rather just pay an influencer on TikTok or Instagram, 1 million followers, come on for 1 or 2 days, kowtow, and say something fantastic.
Because I think they understand Instagram more. I think they get Instagram more. It's a pretty picture because it's marketing. It's a pretty picture because I've been on trips before where there's been Instagram. It's like, oh my God. But it's sort of, because it's about the shot, you know, the hand on hip looking.
And a lot of the Instagrammers don't have knowledge about cruising. So they're not even going to impart anything vaguely useful.
No, it's about glossy imagery.
Well, that's why you see when certain cruise lines inviting like mum influencers, or you know, just something that has nothing to do with the cruise.
They're in a totally different industry.
Completely. And like you said, they will not tell you the facts. They won't tell you the photo they're taking the food of is an upcharge dining room. Do you know what I mean? They just won't tell you that.
So if you look at maidens now, or big bashes, the cruise lines now are inviting way more Instagram and TikTok influencers who have nothing to do with maybe run a cleaning channel or a posing channel, whatever it is.
Which is fine. But you still need to have that balance of those that are in industry like us that can tell you.
They don't. I think their concern is inviting people on board that know their onions a bit too much, and you know, the more cruises you've done, the more experience you have, you know, you've got more to compare to, and that's why we were able to go on a cruise and say, oh well, that's better on that line compared to here.
But that's again coming back to, like, think people understanding the purchase cycle. The role of the Instagram is the sexy, alluring shot. that might get you interested, but then through the purchase of, if we want part of the money, want to know the truth, like how it really is. I think that's they understand. They understand the first part.
Get 50% off your first order when you subscribe to Sail Away magazine. Get the digital version for £3.95 and the printed edition for £6.95 every 2 months. Subscribe today at sailawaymagazine.com. Are muster drills still effective, or just a tick box exercise these days?
I don't think people watch them. I mean, very rarely nowadays do you actually have to do a physical muster drill anymore.
Have you seen the Virgin one?
Yeah, wait, it's blasted over the TV, isn't it? In the cabin, and you can't do anything else until you watched it. It's going to a nightclub, isn't it? How often do you have an in-person muster anymore?
The only time I've seen it is when, I think, because they have to every now and again do an in-person one. But I'm not sure that people don't pay attention in the real one. They just crumble about how long it's taking. So I don't know, other than you know where to go. Like I don't even know if the old-fashioned one was particularly powerful, other than you know where you have to go.
You knew where your life jacket was.
You knew where your life jacket was. So I don't know whether I don't know whether there were. I feel like there might have been a box taking one. What are we interested? What I've never heard in people interviewed is people who've been when there's an issue, like when there's the Viking Sky one, when you ship that get people off the ship. I'd love to know from them what role the muster, because it was in the day of the old-fashioned muster drill. Did they actually think the muster drill helped, or was it actually what happened when there was an issue?
I'm going to sound like the turkey that wished for Christmas now, because I prefer it, because I used to find muster drills, the full muster drills that you used to do pre-pandemic, a complete chore. But as someone that worked in the industry, I do fear that there could be a problem at some point, because I don't think we know enough when we go on a cruise of what to do in an emergency and how to put on a life jacket. And I just feel like it really is a tick box exercise these days.
Yeah. To your point, I mean, last time I was on, I think it was on Regent, it was one of the times when they had to do it, and it was a bit shambolic. But it was more shambolic not from the passengers' side, it was shambolic from the crew side, because they weren't used to suddenly, it wasn't one of their bigger ships, only 550 people was on Navigator, but they weren't used to processing 500 and something people into the muster station. So that was kind of, I guess, a warning sign. They didn't, because we had a queue because they had to scan everybody in and stuff. So I guess you want the crew, you want to be confident the crew are going to know what to do, I guess, to your point.
With both of you, we've spoke about gratuities before. Do you believe, though, that daily gratuities are just a way for cruise lines to pay less in wages?
It's hard to unpick it, but if you look at follow some of the crew sites, they would talk about when they sign on, they're guaranteed X, 100, and that's something shown it's made up for a function of this is your salary, this is the bit that will be from gratuities. So the suggestion is when you sign up on some lines, and some cruise lines have posted on pay slips, is you're guaranteed an amount, and that's part of that is with gratuities. So I still much prefer. I would much prefer if, because they're not gratuities anymore, they're a service charge. So the gratuities is a nonsense. I would just much prefer is the crew know how much they're going to earn. We know how much we're going to pay. And should someone do an amazing job, we can go back to the old gratuities thing. And I'm sure Americans are very different. I tip when someone's amazing. So like on my last cruise, the chemistry was fantastic. He was just brilliant. And that I had a butler who was okay, and I didn't tip him, but I tipped the chemistry because he was fantastic. So because that's to me was good, because it's all, I'd paid a lot of money to be on there, and it's included. So I would kind of like, the fare is the fare, and if you tip people who do a fantastic job.
I think there's one thing that Virgin's getting right, and I think people appreciate that. I mean, why is it that the ultra and luxury cruise lines factor in or price in tipping, but the lower ones don't? And that's why you really got to really, as you mentioned earlier, cost out what this cruise is really costing, because that tipping is a major item. When it's $18, $20, $25 a day per person, that makes a huge difference, and more cruise lines should bundle it in.
And this argument, which I really take issue with, is that by paying gratuities, you're going to get excellent and friendly service, and no bollocks. Because as you just said, on Virgin, it's some of the friendliest, most efficient service that we've experienced. And the crew seem genuinely happy.
Mm.
They see themselves, and I don't feel that it's fake. We were on Cunard last week, and I'm sorry to say, I didn't see friendly or impeccable service the whole time I was on there.
But I think that's a critical point. You go on a ship and it's either a happy ship or it's not a happy ship, and that depends on the captain, the hotel's manager. And I don't think it's a function of gratuities to it. It's how well the ship is run and how the crew is motivated and I guess rewarded, because I guess what the reviews, the surveys and stuff, and how that kind of factors through.
Yeah.
It's not the gratuities that make improve that.
No, I mean, absolutely. We were on Holland America Rotterdam last year. Amazing Dutch captain. And the staff were so happy. They were singing, they were dancing.
Exactly.
Eric Barhoff, I think his name was. And he was a good captain. He was walking around, he was visible, he was jocular, he was happy, and it filtered through.
So, your most disliked video, why do you think this particular video struggled to strike the right tone?
One of my more watched videos is also the one which gets the most mixed reaction, which was Resilient Lady for Virgin. Because again, I went in there trying to be very neutral. I had no perception before I went on board whether we were going to enjoy. Certain parts of the Virgin experience I think is fantastic. We were saying the crew is some of the happiest people. I think they're very efficiently run ships. The range of cuisine on Virgin is fantastic. It's speciality quality dining and all of their restaurants. So there were some elements of Virgin that I thought were fantastic. But as always, for me personally, there were some aspects that I didn't think were brilliant. I don't think that the Grounds Coffee Club is particularly comfortable. I think some of the chairs are dead uncomfortable on Virgin. Certain places, the dock house, some of the seating is uncomfortable. The swimming pool is ridiculously small. And so I tried to build that in. Also, I think that the various parties that they have on board are not for everybody. When you have the various parties at beginning, middle, and end, with their overtones of what it's almost the red light districts of Amsterdam. Really, it's almost like Virgin said, let's create Amsterdam on board. It's not going to be for everybody, and I was merely saying I don't think it's for everybody, because I think sometimes when people book a cruise, they don't think, is it suitable for me? And I was merely trying to say Virgin isn't for everybody. For a lot of people, yes. And I get really vitriolic comments. People say, oh, you're too old, or grow up, be more liberal, you're too straight-faced, oh, go back to Cunard, you Cunard lover, or, or whatever. Never mind the fact I'm quite critical of Cunard as well. People just throw things at you because they felt that you were just being... With Virgin, if you don't go to every pyjama party, or you're not up every night or drinking endless amounts of alcohol, people think you don't want fun in life. So it's one of our most watched videos, but it's also one of our most hated videos.
Yeah, and I think you'd agree with us that at no point do you say that you're always right and your opinion is more important than anyone else's. You're just giving your opinion and your observations, but I think you get some people online that hear your opinion, it differs from their own, and then they become very critical. I mean, I think we've said before, our most disliked video is P&O Arvia, the review that we did, but it's also one of the most watched. And I don't think it's all negative. I think people hear what they want to hear, to be honest. I think they'll hear one negative and then everything after that is negative.
I mean, it's interesting. Probably the video that gets the most kind of argument about is a video did about the environment and cruising. So it's not one of my most watched videos, but it's the one that probably was the most divisive, because obviously people who don't like cruising leapt on it and were very critical, and people who like cruising basically realized that they don't really care about cruising and the environment. That's the cruise line to get on with. That was the one that caused the most kind of argument, but more from people who hate cruising. And I guess because the way the algorithm works, because people who hated cruising were commenting and getting very engaged, to push it out to more people who hate cruising. So that's why. So it was just interesting. It was one thing I discovered. I sort of learned that that's always going to be divisive. But it was also, for me, it was a revelation that it's just going to reinforce attitudes. People who don't like it are going to hate, and cruisers don't really care about the environmental side of cruising.
Yeah, but it's a message that cruise lines continue to focus on, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's a bit like I'm maybe as a consumer, I mean, I'm interested in the environment, but I'm not massive into the environment. I think that's the company's job to get on with. So I sort of expect cruising to sort out, then get the environmental act. But to me, it's not a reason. I'm not going to book a line because of its environment.
No, I find it interesting though that cruise lines are more and more often pushing this environmental topic. Like Simon Calder kind of agreed with us when we interviewed him once. Long and short, the cruise industry is not good for the environment. Like it's far better than what it used to be. Like they can make changes and do their best, but you know, this idea that cruise ships are LNG and it's much better for the environment, well, it's also very difficult to source.
I was on the streets and it was interesting to see how few ports you can actually bunker LNG.
It's a nightmare.
And there's not very many. I was surprised it's not very many. But also it's interesting, I was on a couple of cruises ago, and I was lucky enough to go to, I was invited to a dinner. The captain picked so many people, and I was one of them. And I was sitting next to one of the chief engineer, and I was asking like, what's, because they bring out LNG ships, and this one was actually LNG is not the way to go. Hydrogen is the way to go. But hydrogen is a whole nother mind-boggling thing if you really want to make a leap. But it's just too difficult, too challenging. So they'll focus on no plastic straws instead.
Well, it was also in the news recently that there were some travel agents running cruise ads, talking about how green the cruise lines were, etc. And the UK's Advertising Standards Authority ruled against them for being misleading.
No, I mean, we know if you fly, if you go on cruises, we're not eco warriors.
Cruise ships on average, sometimes they're doing 6 meters to the gallon. You can't then run an advert saying that we're green because we're running on a fuel that's a bit better than another. But we're now just a few quickfire questions. Favourite cruise drink?
Mine was very bizarre. Caffeine-free Diet Coke.
Margarita, no salt.
Most overrated cruise port?
Venice, because it's nowhere near Venice.
Yeah, I would be the same. Any port that's nowhere near where it's going.
Loud sail away party or peaceful deck chair?
I don't think either of them. I don't know. I'm going to sit in a bar myself and watch a sail away.
Biggest waste of money on a cruise?
Art auctions. Because they're not there for because people buy them because they think they're buying an investment.
Drinks package, because my wife doesn't drink.
You could sail with only one cruise line, MSC or P&O?
MSC for me, definitely.
You didn't say the Woolwich Ferry, couldn't you? You could have said that. You didn't mention Costa either. MSC.
Lovely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Sail Away Uncensored Cruise Podcast.